One of Vladimir Putin's closest allies is the president of Belarus, Lukashenko himself. Alexander Lukashenko has issued a direct warning to the United States. Even though he recently met with Trump's team and there have been positive messages between the United States and Belarus, the warning has been very clear, even mentioning that a nuclear war could break out. And the thing is, Lukashenko claims that the Tomahawk missiles the United States intends to send to Ukraine would not resolve the situation. Come on, they wouldn't bring peace to the area. On the contrary, he says that these Tomahawks, these missiles that, by the way, have much greater range and much more power than the missiles Ukraine currently has. I'm sure they'll report on these Tomahawks. These missiles could reach up to 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border to any point in Russia, at least to places like St. Petersburg, Moscow, or the most important cities. Why is Lukashenko worried about this? He argues that from his perspective, this could escalate, potentially even to nuclear conflict. According to what Lukashenko warns, these missiles could put at risk the possibility of stability in the area, or could cause greater instability, and this would lead to an even bigger conflict. It should be remembered that the Russia-Belarus relationship has become even more unified. Not just through military exercises, but also in other ways. Part of the nuclear weapons that Russia has are now stationed in Belarus, and they could also launch from there. Nuclear bombs. Just a few weeks ago, there was an exercise. What would happen if something happens? And they carried out a drill simulating the launch of nuclear weapons, making it clear to the world that nuclear weapons are already active in Belarus. Why is President Lukashenko delivering this message? Because he knows perfectly well that at this very moment, Donald Trump is considering the possibility of sending Tomahawks and other types of weapons to Ukraine. This assessment also depends on the type of pressure from Russia, Belarus, or Russia's allies to calculate whether the effort and risk of sending Tomahawks to Ukraine is worth it. An urgent request has been made from Ukraine. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has said that this is the moment when any weapon like the Tomahawk or longer-range missiles could be very useful to destroy part of the logistics that Russia uses for the war in Ukraine. For example, oil refineries, military bases, especially air bases, and missile launchers. Those would be Ukraine's main targets to try to stop the Russian offensive, or at least slow it down as much as possible, especially considering that there won't be any advances on the ground right now, since winter is approaching, and these kinds of advances usually pause during winter. But air attacks intensify. There are no advances on the ground anymore, but they attack each other constantly from the air, trying to weaken one another. In this situation, does the United States want to give Ukraine more air power, or is that also what Zelensky himself is requesting? Previously, it's important to remember that Donald Trump has shown a lot of hesitation about how far to support this conflict, although things have sped up recently. But before this, he had his doubts about whether to send certain types of weapons to Ukraine. And now the change is that not only are they apparently going to send more weapons, but they might also tell them where to aim. So, does that mean the United States would give intelligence information to Ukraine? To tell them, look, this is a valid target, a military target, this one isn't, don't touch this one, and so on. That's an issue that obviously Russia hasn't liked, and Belarus hasn't liked either. Because besides, another interesting thing about this is, okay, now you have the Tomahawks, but who's going to operate them? At the end of the day, it's not that simple. You'd need to have people trained and specialized in launching Tomahawk missiles. Here's the question. Will Americans be the ones launching them? Will the United States participate at that level? That's what Vladimir Putin says he believes. If the Ukrainians haven't been trained to launch Tomahawk missiles, then who is going to fire them? At least that's the point of view the Kremlin has right now. Are you suggesting that if they have the Tomahawks, it would mean the United States would be participating more directly? It's true that if these missiles were launched using F-16S, the Ukrainians do have training in that kind of launch. But if they're launched in another way, apparently not. At least that's the idea. Zelensky says that this strategy of having the Tomahawks would help bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. I mean, they've already tried the peaceful way one way and then the peaceful way another way. Now they'll try increasing military pressure. Let's see if it works. That way, Russia will be encouraged to sit at the negotiating table and finally reach an agreement to put an end to this conflict once and for all. That's also what this Trump wants to push for. At least that's what he apparently seems to be trying to do. To become or try to act as a kind of peacemaker in major conflicts, which, well, we'll see if it works out for him. There's a whole diplomatic crusade from the United States toward Russia, Russia toward Belarus, and toward various NATO points. Trying, well, to make the United States influential again, once more, as influential as it used to be in the past. And in some ways, it has succeeded, for example, with the case of Israel, which apparently it has managed to do so far. Although this is still hanging by a thread and could become destabilized at any moment. On the other hand, something very serious just happened. Because a meteor grazed the Earth, or that's practically how the scientists put it. When it passes within a few hundred kilometers, they say it grazed the Earth. And the thing is, there's an early warning system to detect asteroids, meteors, and things like that. But sometimes some meteors go undetected. We're still far from observing 100% of space, only certain angles are being observed. This meteor, which is about the size of a car, passed about 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. It barely skimmed by. And if it had impacted, even though it would have caused little damage, if it had fallen on the city, it obviously would have caused a problem. And what they're criticizing now is that there isn't an early warning system that's well made or sensitive enough to detect meteors that could put the planet or a city at risk. Given this situation, they are asking for more research and investment in these types of early warning projects so that we can determine when there's a risk from a meteor. This one has been called Meteor 2025 TF, which they say is an object that wasn't detected by the Catalina Sky Survey. That should have been the one to detect the meteor. An hour later, when there was nothing left to do, that's when this meteor was detected. The detection of meteors with such short notice doesn't give you time. It doesn't give you a chance to do anything at all, not even to evacuate. 2025 TF is proof that there are risks when it comes to space, when it comes to asteroids and meteors. Although up until now in, let's say, modern times, nothing too serious has happened. One day this might really scare us. That's why they asked for more development to prepare us for any problem of this kind. On the other hand, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, has given a strong warning to that country, but also to the whole world, stating that China, the government of China, is taking such a tough stance on economic issues that it wants to drag all the economies of the world along with it. For some reason, he says they want to drag us all along. Into their crisis or into their economic problem. And in response to this, the United States Secretary, the Secretary of the Treasury, accuses China of using economic weapons, such as export controls on rare earths, to drag the world into an economic crisis. What he doesn't say is that Donald Trump is doing exactly the same thing. Donald Trump is using the economic weapon. Precisely to create problems in different parts of the world and to put pressure so that they do what he wants and set the economic conditions he desires. Yes, he is probably doing it. The rare earths issue and other topics are getting tough. But just look at what Trump has done on the economic front. Well, this also draws attention today, but let's move on to other important information. I'll leave you here with some videos, some of the most important news that's happening right now. Let's go.